My 30th birthday was supposed to be a fresh start, but it turned into the night my own flesh and blood locked me away like a criminal. It all started when Grandma quietly pressed a $100,000 check into my palm, whispering that I should use it to finally escape my toxic family. But my parents saw it happen. The moment Grandma left, the heavy click of the deadbolt echoed through the house. "That money belongs to this family," Mom snapped, her eyes wild with sudden greed. When I refused to hand it over, Dad didn't hesitate. He slammed the door shut, locking me inside my old bedroom. My brother just laughed through the wood, taunting, "You'll never cash it." But they underestimated me. I escaped out the window, running straight to the bank. Yet, when the manager looked at the check, he turned completely white and gasped, "Ma'am, don't cash this. Call the police now." My name is Lena Caldwell, and the day I turned 30 was supposed to be the day I finally reclaimed my life. For as long as I can remember, my parents, Richard and Eleanor, treated me like a financial utility rather than a daughter. Every paycheck I earned from my grueling corporate job was heavily taxed by them under the guise of family solidarity, while my golden child younger brother, Leo, lived a life of absolute luxury funded entirely by my sweat. I was trapped in a suffocating cycle of psychological and financial control, a prisoner in my own home. But my 30th birthday brought a sudden shift in the winds. My grandmother, Evelyn, the only person in that house who truly loved me, called me into the quiet, dim hallway away from the small family gathering. With trembling, wrinkled hands, she pressed a crisp paper slip into my palm and closed my fingers over it. It was a check for exactly $100,000. "Take it, Lena," she whispered, her eyes shining with fierce urgency. "Use this to buy your independence and leave this place tonight." Before I could even find the words to thank her, she slipped out the front door. But as I turned around, the warmth drained instantly from my chest. Richard, Eleanor, and Leo were standing at the end of the hall, their eyes locked onto my hand with a terrifying, predatory hunger. Before we find out what they did next, tell me, what city or country are you watching from? Comment below so I can see how far this story has reached. The heavy silence in the hallway shattered the moment Eleanor took a sharp step forward, her face twisted into a mask of pure greed. "Hand it over, Lena," she demanded, her voice cutting through the air like broken glass. "That money belongs to this family. You owe us for every single year we've kept a roof over your ungrateful head." I felt a cold panic spike through my veins, but a sudden, unfamiliar wave of defiance took over. I backed away, swiftly slipping the folded check deep inside the lining of my leather boot. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Grandma gave this to me. It's my future." Dad's eyes narrowed into slits. He didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his heavy hand forcefully snatching my purse and tearing the phone straight out of my grip. Before I could even scream, his powerful hand gripped my shoulder and violently shoved me backward into my old, cramped childhood bedroom. I stumbled over the rug, crashing to the floor. The heavy vintage oak door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Click. The metallic echo of the deadbolt locking from the outside rang through the wood, sealing my fate. From the dark hallway, Leo's mocking laughter drifted through the door. "You're pathetic, Lena," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. "You'll never cash that check. By tomorrow morning, you'll sign it over to us, or you'll never see the light of day again." The darkness in my bedroom felt thick and suffocating, but it couldn't stop the furious adrenaline rushing through my veins. I sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the muffled sounds of my family celebrating downstairs, clinking glasses to a victory they hadn't even secured yet. I knew exactly what morning would bring. They would use hunger, isolation, or outright physical intimidation to force my signature onto that paper. I had to get out tonight. I crept over to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pushed up against the frame, but it didn't budge. It had been painted shut for over a decade. Dropping to my knees, I frantically searched my old vanity drawer until my fingers wrapped around a long, sharp metal bobby pin. With agonizing slowness, I wedged the metal point into the hardened seam of paint, chipping away at the crust while praying the scraping sounds wouldn't alert Leo down the hall. After 20 minutes of exhausting work, I shoved upward with all my remaining strength. Thud. The window slid open, letting in a rush of cold, midnight air. I carefully squeezed through the narrow opening, my boots gripping the steep, slick shingles of the porch roof. Bracing myself against the icy wind, I slid down toward the edge, grabbed the sturdy iron drain pipe, and scrambled down to the damp grass below. I didn't look back. I ran blindly into the dark, heading straight toward the town center, shivering but entirely free. The cold morning sun was just beginning to hit the brick facade of First National Bank when I pulled myself through the heavy glass doors. I was completely exhausted. My clothes were disheveled from the midnight flight, and my hands shook violently as I smoothed out the crumpled slip of paper. I approached the counter and practically begged the teller to let me see the manager. Within 2 minutes, I was ushered into a quiet, mahogany-paneled back office where a distinguished man named Mr. Vance sat behind a massive desk. I didn't waste any time. I pulled the $100,000 check from my leather boot and slid it across the polished wood. "I need to cash this immediately, please," I whispered, my voice cracking from exhaustion. Mr. Vance adjusted his glasses and picked up the paper. He began typing the routing numbers into his computer terminal. I watched his eyes scan the screen, and then, right before my eyes, the color completely drained from his face. His hands froze over the keyboard. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of absolute shock and profound alarm. He stood up abruptly, walked over to the office door, and securely clicked the lock into place before turning back to me. "Ma'am," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Do not cash this check. In fact, you need to call the police right now." My heart plummeted into my stomach. "What? Why? Is the check fake?" "No, the check is completely valid," Mr. Vance said, leaning forward in his chair. "But this specific trust account was flagged by our fraud department just 3 hours ago. Your parents, Richard and Eleanor, are at our main branch right now. They are attempting to freeze your grandmother's assets using a freshly signed power of attorney, claiming Evelyn is mentally incompetent." Before I could even process the horror of what my parents were doing, Mr. Vance picked up his desk phone and dialed emergency services. Within 10 minutes, 2 police officers and an older gentleman arrived at the office. The man introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, Grandma Evelyn's longtime estate lawyer. I sat there trembling, expecting the worst. But Mr. Sterling gave me a reassuring, gentle smile that instantly calmed my racing heart. "Don't be afraid, Lena," Mr. Sterling said, leaning forward to explain the situation clearly. "Your grandmother is completely lucid, and she knew exactly what your parents were plotting. She discovered weeks ago that Richard and Eleanor were trying to secretly forge her signature on a power of attorney to seize her life savings." He explained that the $100,000 check wasn't just a generous birthday gift to help me escape. It was actually a brilliant, legally binding trap. Grandma Evelyn had deliberately established a secret, separate trust account that my parents had no knowledge of, and she placed a specific fraud alert on it. "The moment you presented this check to a bank teller," one of the police officers intervened, "it served as a definitive legal trigger. It officially proved that Evelyn was voluntarily moving her own money to you, completely contradicting the fraudulent paperwork your parents are presenting at the main branch right now." I stared at the check, tears prickling my eyes as the full weight of Grandma's love washed over me. She had used her own wealth to create an airtight trap. She didn't just give me money, she gave the authorities the exact evidence they needed to stop my parents forever. The legal trap my grandmother had meticulously laid snapped shut with brutal, unforgiving precision. Armed with the bank's digital tracking data, the evidence of the forged power of attorney, and my own harrowing eyewitness testimony regarding the unlawful imprisonment, the police didn't waste a single moment. While I remained safe inside the manager's office, a fleet of police cruisers intercepted Richard and Eleanor right at the main branch, putting them in handcuffs before they could even step outside the building. Simultaneously, a second police unit raided our family home. They caught my brother, Leo, completely off guard as he sat in the living room, casually browsing luxury car websites and waiting to see how much of my money he would get to spend. Instead of a payday, he was met with a search warrant. The police thoroughly swept the house, uncovering the hidden records where my parents had been tracking their fraudulent transfers and systemic elder financial abuse for months. Richard and Eleanor were officially booked on multiple severe felony charges, including extortion, false imprisonment, and grand larceny. Because their entire lavish lifestyle had been built on a fragile house of cards funded by stolen family assets, their banking credentials were frozen instantly. Within weeks, the creditors caught wind of the criminal charges and swooped in, seizing Leo's sports car and demanding immediate liquidation of the family's assets to cover their massive debts. The toxic household that had suffocated me for 30 long years completely crumbled to ash in a matter of days. The very people who had locked me in a room to strip away my future had successfully managed to completely destroy their own. 3 months later, the nightmare was entirely behind us. Grandma Evelyn and I officially packed up what was left of our belongings and moved far away to a charming coastal town. Using the fully cleared $100,000, we bought a beautiful sunlit cottage overlooking the ocean, where the air was clean and completely free of toxicity. For the first time in my adult life, I wake up without a crushing weight in my chest. My parents tried to lock me away and steal my future, but they only succeeded in locking themselves behind bars. Grandma and I are finally safe, independent, and truly happy. Now, I'm curious about all of you who followed my journey until the end. What would you have done if your own parents locked you in a room just to steal your hard-earned money? Would you have jumped out that window? Comment your thoughts below. And while you're here, I'm leaving 2 other incredible stories on the screen right now that are channel favorites. They will absolutely surprise you. Thank you so much for watching.